mode.
Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Community webinar. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Larry Kluger, Developer Center Program Manager at DocuSign, who will be talking to you about your most successful SharePoint project, e-signatures. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC15. Larry will also be speaking at European SharePoint Conference 2015 in Stockholm this November. He will be joined by some of the top names in SharePoint, and we are delighted to announce that Jeff Teeper will join Seth Patton and Bill Baer for the opening keynote, where they will share their roadmap for SharePoint and OneDrive. Luckily, we still have some fantastic group booking rate discounts for European SharePoint Conference 2015. Go to www.sharepointeurope.com for more information. After the webinar, we will have a Q&A. Type any questions you have for Larry in the question pane in the control panel. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. And now, I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Larry Kluger. Hello, Larry.
Okay, hello everybody. Let me push the right buttons here. And we will be off. Okay, I think that we're all set now. Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you very much, Shane. And everybody who's in on the webinar, thank you very much for joining us. So I'm going to be talking about electronic signatures and more broadly digital transaction management in two phases today. The first will be a general discussion, and then the latter part is specific information about my company's products, DocuSign, and I'll be giving you two demos using some of our products. So let me start off with a bold statement here, and that all successful businesses will be 100% digital. Now, that's sort of a marketing statement. It comes from a number of different sources. These are the usual current big thinkers in the business. Now, I can't tell you that if you're 100% digital, then you will be a successful business, but the idea is that all successful businesses, one of the things that will be in common for them is that they'll be 100% digital. So what do we really mean by that? You can see some of the study names down at the bottom from MIT, Sloan Management Review. They're in the States, and Deloitte and Touche. They've also been investigating this sort of a thing. And what they find is that organizations that rank very high on how much they've invested to have a full digital system, they're more profitable, they have more revenue, they have a more market valuation, and basically the news is all good. So what does it mean? Why do you want to do this kind of thing? We can break it into three different parts. The first is that the customer experience should be better when it's digital. So what does that mean? Everything online, but beyond online, everything mobile at this point, and even beyond mobile, even working when there's no immediate internet connection, which certainly happens on occasion. So we want a top-notch customer experience. We want security and compliance. Now, the benefit of electronic systems is that you can build in auditing systems for them, and that way there's no need for humans to be manually checking things. This starts at the very beginning when you're asking customers to fill out forms, that the form system asks for the person to fill in all the different fields so that they don't omit something. The security and compliance goes way beyond that, of course, and it's these days extra important. So what you want is to make sure that your systems are providing this to the satisfaction not just of yourself if you're in the IT department or in the line of business group, but also at the level of discussing with your counsel and your what's sometimes called the risk officers, that sort of those sorts of folks. And then return on investment. The benefit of digital is that things go faster, and that saves money, and it can save big money. That's been our experience for years now, and that's backed up by studies that have been done by AIM and other organizations. So what do we have? This is the sort of before and after slide that the enterprise has a number of different systems typically. Enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, human resources management, line of business systems, change control systems, and then there's the people who use them, and they're of all different sorts. And then in the middle, what is so often the case is that things get turned into paper, and there's a lot of time wasted, not to mention trees, but especially time. And the time starts just with paper, but then it further is even more time as the paper that gets signed has to be processed manually, data entered or scanned. It's not a pretty picture. In words, what I'm talking about is disconnected systems, manual processes, and at the center of it really is the poor customer experience, whether the customers are the outside folks who are paying your bills or whether they're internal employees who have to deal with pieces of paper. Now, there is a better way, electronic signatures, and within the field of electronic signatures, that includes all types of electronic signatures, ranging from regular electronic signatures up through advanced electronic signatures and qualified electronic signatures. Which one you use depends on the individual situation and use case. The goal is to have everything be digital. So it's the signatures, as I was mentioning, but it's beyond signatures. It's also storage of the documents. It's also workflow of the signature requests, everything online, ready for you to do quickly and make use of easily. Here's another way of looking at it. Here's a nice PowerPoint animation. Let's see if it works today. So what we want to get to is where everything is online all the time. No more printing, then signing, then scanning. And you'll also notice part of the idea of this graphic is some of these devices are sort of floating off in the sky there, and the focus there is mobile. And we've seen just tremendous uptake of signing via mobile devices. You want to think about it as a first question whenever you're talking to any sort of a vendor who's discussing digital transaction management, electronic signatures, digital signatures, anything like that. You want to ask them and have them show you what's the mobile experience. These days, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's far more mobile devices being used to access systems than there are desktops systems. The rate of sales of mobile internet-capable phones and tablets is significantly greater than PCs. Now, for me, I've been in the industry for a while, and I'm still sort of wrapping my head around it, but it's something to really think about and have that sign up in your office or on the wall of your area that says think mobile first, because that's what your customers are thinking, that's what your executives are thinking who want to be able to participate and sign documents and approve things while they're on the road or on the train or at home or wherever they are, and they want to do it easily at their convenience. This is the whole focus of bring your own device, and it's no longer sort of an option, it's the way the world is working now. So mobile is important. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Now, I referred to this a little bit earlier on. The signature is just one small part of what we call digital transaction management. Some analysts also are using that term. Various companies are doing that. And the focus is that it's beyond the signature. So let's talk about some of the things you want to be asking your vendors about and putting onto your checklist and requests for quotation and requests for proposal, that sort of thing. The first is, does the system help you with the preparation part? So that means the documents themselves, converting them to PDF, and tagging the documents in terms of where the person should sign and so forth. And then it's beyond the documents. It's also the data. It's typical that a form, for example, will start off as a document, but then will have data added into it. So you want the ability to easily have the data flow out of your line of business systems and into the document so that what you end up with is a complete document that can then be authorized and signed. Workflow is very important. Now, workflow comes, the range of workflow is enormous. And at the starting level, though, and that's something to always ask about, is can you have first one signer sign and then the document goes on to the next person to sign? Can you have people set up so they do something other than sign, such as receive a copy or acknowledge the receipt of a copy? Does the workflow make it easy for an in-person signer to have the tablet turned over to her and then she signs it? So in this case, this woman is signing, but she's simply doing it essentially in person, and the staff member is the one who's controlling the tablet and so forth. And that's different than sending to a customer, and we want to have options for doing both. So some amount of workflow is extremely helpful to be part of the signature system. Now, once you get beyond that, that's where we bring in SharePoint, that's where we bring in Nintex, K2, SharePoint Designer, WebCon, all these different systems, and of course that's a big source of interest and very important to the industry, and that's what we're all going to be certainly looking over and reviewing what's the latest when we're in Stockholm in a couple of weeks. So that's workflow. So this is all the preparation. Then there's the execution. Now, number one, and that's why it's at the top, is the authentication of the person who's signing. So this is a very important subject. I've written many blog posts on this, and I'll be writing a lot more in the future too. The issue for authentication is that it depends on the transaction. It depends on what's being signed. If you're in a store and you hand over your credit card and you're in the States, then they often want you to scribble on a piece of paper, and then it's really thrown away and no one cares, and you really didn't have to authenticate yourself at all. You simply handed the credit card. There was no per se authentication. And sometimes that's all that's needed for a given transaction. But other times you want to have a little bit more understanding of who the person is and make a record of how you knew who the person was who signed on the line. So authentication is something you want to always understand how the vendor does it. The best is to have many different levels of authentication that can then be chosen as appropriate, or can be set up to be defaults or be restricted within your own individual installation. So for example, one level of authentication that's pretty basic is to simply send someone an email. A second level of authentication is what's called two-factor authentication, where you send them an email and you also send them, let's say, an SMS message at the time that they are signing, and that way you make sure that the person who's signing possesses both the cell phone and also possesses access to the email account. Another way, which is also two-factor authentication, but it's being done in a different way, is to have what's called a pre-shared secret. So, for example, you already know that the person's going to sign. You already know their national ID number because they've told it to you, and obviously the person knows their own national ID number or can look it up. And so then when you send them the signing request, at some point the system says, please enter the national ID number, and then they can do that, and at that point you've authenticated the person. Another way to do it is what's called an enrolled authentication process. So what that means, and this is used for people who are signing where they've already enrolled within your system. They've authenticated themselves either in person or in some other way. They're known to you. They have their own login to your own system, that sort of a thing. So at that point, your application, your system, can assume the responsibility for the authentication of the signer. And so what that means is that you want the ability for your own application to say who the to say that let's say Susan is indeed Susan because she logged in. We've had a relationship with her. She's known. And so then when she clicks sign on your system then talks to the signature system, a SaaS provider, let's say, and then what the SaaS provider does then is open up the window so that the person can sign, but the person's already been authenticated by your system. Then the signature part is legal stuff, and the actual graphical scribble on the page these days is not so important when you're using electronic systems. What's more important is, in fact, the authentication of the person. But we still often like to see how the person draws their signature on paper, and that can be accommodated. You also want to be asking about advanced electronic signatures or qualified electronic signatures to make sure that for different sorts of transactions where it's required by law or required by your organizational policy, that a person can sign using a digital certificate. And all these options should be available to you from your vendor. Templates is a way of making things easier for the person sending out the document typically. A lot of different vendors offer that, and you want to see that it's easy to do, and that way you don't have to duplicate your work for a given workflow, because many things will be the same from one document to the next if both documents are part of the same business process. Now, once the signing ceremony, as we say in the business, once the signing ceremony has been taken care of, then you want to be looking for the next step, and that's management. So management means reporting back to all the people involved what happened and who signed, where they signed, how did they sign, how are they authenticated, all these sorts of different things. Retention of the data. Now, the benefit here is that by having everything stored online within the system where things are signed, that makes it very easy. You don't have to move it to another system, and it's stored forever, all very secure and so forth. But also, you should have the option that it's not retained by the SaaS system. Instead, it's retained by your system of record, for example, such as, for example, SharePoint, that kind of a thing. And obviously, a lot of people like to do it that way, and that's fine. That should be fine with your vendor. Audit trails of all the significant events are very important. Now, at the bottom of this slide, there's additional characteristics which are not about the individual transaction, but are more about the vendor. The first is that signatures are worth money, and your vendor should have the same level of security as the people who take care of money every day, namely banks. Excuse me. Now, that's a matter that the vendor should prove to you, and you should ask lots of questions about how that works and how do they know and so forth. There's very often a security review done of vendors in this category. And in fact, at my company, we got a whole department full of people who take care of security and all that, but then in addition, we got another department full of people who just discuss the situation with our customers and prospective customers and make sure that the security audits are fulfilled and everything is done to the satisfaction of the customers. And it takes a lot of money to provide bank-grade security, and so that's why you want to be sure to be focusing in on whether your vendor is doing that or not. The next is carrier-grade availability. Carrier means the terminology is from the States. Carriers are the telephone companies, the internet providers, the electric company. So what we're talking now is 5 nines availability. We're talking zero, and that's not during operating hours. That's with zero scheduled maintenance. In other words, 100% scheduled availability. I just got a note from a very large SaaS system that I use here, and they're by far the leader in their space, and they said, well, we're going to be doing a maintenance window, and it's going to be 3 minutes long, and it's going to be happening from this time to that time, and sort of like, well, if that's nice, then okay, I can accept that, I suppose, from what you do for me. But for something mission critical like getting things signed, that's not acceptable. So you want to be asking about 100% scheduled availability, zero windows of maintenance. And then the next question, of course, is how well do they do on that? Do they meet their do they meet a 4 nines target, 5 nines, 6 nines? Has it been 100% for a couple of months? That kind of a thing. So you want to be sure to have that as part of your planning. Global architecture, no one's local, everyone is global. That especially applies to all of us in Europe. I've lived in Europe for many years, and despite the accent, I enjoy that. And so we want to make sure that the end signer can sign in his or her own language, and that everything is set up for that. Global architecture also means these days issues of data residency and all these other privacy or privacy for the British privacy issues. And then the last thing that you want is open integration, and that means not only APIs that people can use, but also that they've been used. You want a large ecosystem of integrations with your vendor. Okay, now at any point if you have questions, as Shane mentioned at the beginning, please by all means type them into the window, and so we can be sure to cover them at the end. So now what I want to switch to is more talking about DocuSign as a particular example of what we call digital transaction management, electronic signatures. I'll start briefly by talking about 3 different customers here. So the one on the left is DuPont, and they're using DocuSign very successfully to complete sales agreements. And the focus to point out here is that this is being done where it's out in the field and there's not always internet connectivity. And we've done the hard work so that you can sign offline and everything is encrypted and so forth, and then when there's internet connectivity, then the transactions are passed back up to the cloud and then eventually back into your SharePoint system if that's how you have things set up. And that's why you can maybe see a little bit of green behind the women, that they're out there in the field. I guess meaning that literally out there in the field. Okay, LinkedIn, we all know LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is in the business, really, it turns out, of getting people hired. We all sort of think of it as a great system while we already have a job, and that's certainly true, but they actually make their profits in very large part from getting people hired and all of that. And they want to have the best system internally as well for hiring people. And they use DocuSign to complete with the employee for the new employee to complete all of their paperwork. And for instance, I use DocuSign to complete all my paperwork and when I became an employee of DocuSign. The next is Silicon Valley Bank, and they are a bank in California. We also have banks doing this in the UK. And the point here is that the person is opening a new account in person. So this is what we call in-person signing. The staff person, which I guess we can clearly tell this is California, it's sort of like which one's the staff person. The banker, that is gets things set up, and the banker is doing the authentication, often looking at the person's driver license or other ID, and then turns the laptop over to that to the new customer, who then is signing in person. And this is this brings up the general discussion of what's called know your customer, which is a big issue in the financial industry, and we participate in that very successfully of many financial companies as customers. Okay, now the three things that I propose to you are to be looking for are choice, experience, and trust. I've talked about some of these previously. To narrow in on them, that's the choice of which applications does the system work with, the experience of using it. I'm going to demo that to you live with my cell phone, if hopefully all my different connections here continue to work. It's always, if it's interesting for you to watch live demos, let me tell you, as the demoer, it's beyond thrilling. It's like nerve-wracking, but that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so, and then the last one is trust, that you need to have a globally trusted system for all of your transactions. Okay, so in terms of DocuSign, how do we do this? On choice, you can use any mobile device, and we have 43 languages implemented, and this is what's called the signer experience. So we have 43 different languages implemented for the signer's experience, and they can do that on mobiles, tablets, and of course using a web browser as well. Choice also means APIs. So we offer both REST and SOAP APIs, and we've got a tremendous number of people using them. And in fact, that's what I'm very much. I wouldn't say I'm in charge of it. I'm on the core team that deals with APIs, and so I look forward to discussing APIs with you. If that's part of your interest in Stockholm, just come by and see me. I'll be at the DocuSign booth. Okay, so, and then also choice means pre-built integrations. You don't want to be doing things that have already been done, and so it's an advantage that you should be asking your vendors, do they have integrations ready to go out of the box for the major systems, and in particular the systems that you make use of. Now, speaking of that, we have systems ready to go, integrations for SharePoint on-prem, SharePoint online, SharePoint Designer, Nintex, K2, WebCon as well. In fact, they're one of the major exhibitors at the conference in Stockholm. And we've got a lot of features here. So let's do a demo. Now, let's see how we can switch over here. Whoops, that was the wrong thing. Okay, so let's see here. All right, so here we have Office 365, and in particular SharePoint Online. You recognize that? I'm logged in as this fellow named Bill Linden. So what I'm going to first do here is we've got two product lines I'm going to be showing you today. The one I'm going to show you first is called the CoSign Central product line. And it's focused on companies, organizations that are very security conscious. It's focused on internal signers, so people within a company or organization who are signing. And it offers a large range of signing services that are oriented around digital certificates. So that's both advanced electronic signatures and qualified electronic signatures. It's common criteria past the regulations. It's centralized. It doesn't use smart cards, and this brings many, many advantages. So CoSign Central is a appliance that is in your data center. So let's see how that works. So I've picked a document here and selected it, and I'll say Sign Documents. And this is available for SharePoint on-prem as well, of course. Okay, so now I'm going to authenticate myself, and remember, I'm an internal signer. So whoops, better do that a little better here. So I am already enrolled. All right. We can also do this with single sign-on, SAML tickets, that sort of thing, so you don't have to redo this. I'm not showing that in this demo. So here's a document, and you can preview it if you want to make sure of what you're signing. Now, where you're going to sign can be preset if you wish, for this demo, I'm doing what we call ad hoc signing, but this could be already preset in this spot. And then I click sign, and now this is getting into the heart of the signing ceremony. I'm choosing which of my signatures I should use. If I have an official stamp, I can have that loaded. And remember, again, this is focused on an internal signer where I'm, as part of joining a company, I would be issued a digital certificate. I would write my signature on a signature pad and have it, the graphical signature that is, and have it uploaded. And this is something, for example, maybe professional engineers use. We have courts using it, all that sort of thing. Okay, so what we now have is a digitally signed document. In this case, it's a digitally signed PDF. And then when I click on Done, it will be transferred back into SharePoint. So this document here is now, in fact, has been signed. And this works very well with K2, Nintex, SharePoint Designer, WebCon, all that sort of thing. And you can have any sorts of workflow that you want to do. Okay, so now let's do a different demonstration. So this will be with an external signer, and this will be using the DocuSign DTM product, DTM meaning Digital Transaction Management. So DocuSign DTM is a SaaS system available through the internet, and it can be used for signing online and offline, but certainly more often it's when everyone's connected. It's an online system. Okay, so here we are again in SharePoint, obviously, and this time I'm going to say DocuSign and get signatures. And things are sort of clicking away here. Okay. Okay, now, you know what, I think I'm going to just, I didn't do this last time I tested it. That's why I say that these things are, okay, I just tried this and let's see here, I'll do it here. Let's see how this works. Okay, this is the joy of demos. So I tried out this demo twice this morning, and I guess things timed out, so I didn't. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let me add the signer. The signer is going to be Sue Jacobs, and her email address is sue.rivercitymusic. Sue.rivercitymusic, yep, at Gmail. Okay, and now she needs to sign. Now there's alternatives, so for example, I could say that she just needs to kind of copy or just needs to view it, that sort of a thing. There can be more than one person. They can be in order. You can send to a group of people, and then the first person in the group who chooses to sign will then sign, all that sort of stuff. Okay. Alrighty. So what's going to happen now is the document's transferred out of SharePoint. It's going over to DocuSign. And what we should see here is a tagging screen. There we go. Okay, so I'm now still the sender. I'm sending the document. I'm getting ready to send it. And what I can do now is tag this document of how the person should sign it. So this can be a list of different recipients. In my case, there's only one recipient for this demo, is Sue. And I'm going to say that she should sign right there. And I could also put in the date that she signed, this sort of a thing, and I could put in other fields. There's many different options, as you can see over here on the left. You can also, depending on your integration, you can put in fields, and then the signer can then update the data that's in the fields, and then that updated data can go back into the your other system that's been integrated with. In this case, I'll just put this in, and now we send it off. Let me just check something here. Okay, so we're going to send it off, and it's doing that. And while it's doing that, I'm now going to go over and look at my cell phone. And here it is. This is the time. This is the time locally here. So, okay, so it already arrived. So now I'm Sue. And I'm going to review it. And remember, Sue is someone out there who is a customer or a partner or something like that. And so she's not enrolled previously. Now, the level of authentication that I chose in this case is email only. I could have chosen SMS. I could have chosen pre-shared secret, as we discussed, all sorts of things. So the first thing that Susan sees is a legal disclosure, and where you say that you specifically are consenting to use electronic records and signatures. Now, if this is not needed in your legal territory, and in some cases in Europe it is needed, in other cases it's not, that kind of a thing, then your system can be configured not to include this. Okay, so then I click on Review Document, and there it is. And I'm just on my Android cell phone here, and this is all good. I go, yeah, this is what I want. This is going to be great. Some mansion. Okay, so so now I click Start, and now it's flashing the sign. I don't know if that's coming through. Anyhow, so now I click Sign, and tells me to turn my device. Okay, so now I'm going to sign. Remember, I'm Sue, what's my name? Jacobs, that sort of thing. So then I hit Adopt and Sign. And that's it. Am I finished? Now, this is you're not done until you say you're done. So I hit Finish. Okay, so now I'm done with the transaction. I've now signed the document. Now, if I want, I can get a copy. I'm going to get a copy via email no matter what, and then if you want, I can have a free account with DocuSign and then see my saved documents there and so forth, but I'm not even going to bother doing that. Okay, so, and with DocuSign, there's no charge ever for the person signing. The charge is for the people to send out the signing requests. Okay, so let's go back to SharePoint, and this was that last window of sending it out. Okay, so we go back to SharePoint, and then if I look here under the documents, here's the one where I tried it earlier, and here's the more recent one that I just did. And it's loaded up to SharePoint, and then here's what I just did. Okay, now all this sort of stuff is configurable and doesn't have to go into that directory, and many options. Okay, so we've seen two different demonstrations now. One was an internal person signing using CoSign Central product line, and the other one was an external person signing using the DocuSign DTM product line. And which one is best for your individual situation and use case varies, and of course our systems engineers and everybody else will assist with that, and we'll have all those experts in Stockholm. You're very welcome to stop by the booth. Speaking of stopping by the booth, I hope that you do stop by, because in fact this webinar I am not receiving your information of whether you've attended this webinar or not, or whether you even registered for this webinar. So if you would like more information, then please either drop me a line or come by the booth, or there's I'll provide more information at the end. Okay, so here's what real customers have found out using DocuSign to move things online. Hewlett-Packard tells us that their document turnaround time was almost halved, and huge reduction in steps, and they calculate very carefully that they're saving $33 each time they send out a signing request from using DocuSign rather than their old system. AstraZeneca, a large life sciences company, has found that now their documents all the time, 85%, are handled in under 1 day. And now this bottom one is something quite important, which is that there's now a standard way of measuring how well satisfied customers are with companies, and it's called Net Promoter Score. And they saw a specific increase by switching over to using an online system, and in particular DocuSign. Expedia cruise ships, every time you take a cruise, there's a large amount of paperwork that needs to be signed by the passenger, and the people doing the signing are not always are sometimes not so computer literate, but what they found is that because of the work that DocuSign has done to make it very easy to sign, as you saw, they're able to switch over to DocuSign and are now saving a lot of money, and turnaround time is far faster than it used to be. Now, this is a very important customer story because Salesforce is a very large partner of ours. We have a very sophisticated Salesforce connector, and for example, data that's in Salesforce can be automatically put into a document that is sent off to the customer, and the customer can update that data if it's wrong, such as, let's say, their telephone number or address or other information. And when they update that information, the updated information will then again automatically be updated in Salesforce. So it's a complete round trip for the data. So it's a very sophisticated connection. They're a big customer, big partner of ours. In addition, Salesforce, the corporation, is a big customer of ours. Now, they started off thinking that what they would do is use DocuSign to get their contract signed when they close business with a new customer for Salesforce. But then what they realized is that they can, in fact, use the power of what we call digital transaction management to not only get the contract signed, but to then have that contract automatically processed without touch, as the Salesforce people call it, without touch, so that the Salesforce platform then provisions the new account and everything involved for that brand new customer completely automatically once the customer has signed the agreement, because everything is online and everything is tracked, so the systems can automatically determine that the new customer has in fact signed and approved and everything else, and then everything gets just happens. So at this point, they're now up to 50% of their contracts for new customers are turned into automatic provisioning without any manual intervention through the system. And you can imagine doing that for enrolling new employees or any other transaction that happens in your company or organization. So to go back to what we were looking for on the digital promise, my proposal is that DocuSign provides that for you, and you can come and kick the tires and see everything at our booth in Stockholm. Now, what's interesting is that John Hinshaw is interviewed in a video that I commend to you on YouTube. If you look for DocuSign, search for DocuSign Hewlett-Packard or HP under the DocuSign YouTube channel. And at one point in my career, I was in fact the CIO at a company, at Remedy Corporation, in fact. And to me, listening to John, the most important thing he said was what I pulled out here, and he stated very clearly that DocuSign has the best ROI of any product we've ever implemented at Hewlett-Packard. And this is backed up also by the data that AIM has researched, which is that 80% of the people who had implemented signature systems, online signature systems, said that in an AIM survey, said that they reached the ROI on their project in a year or less. And in fact, 25% of the people said they had accomplished their ROI in 3 months or less. So there's tremendous savings of money in addition to all these other advantages. We've got a lot of experience. We want to be your partner, and we have a lot of people who are good about that, who will help you with that. So let's talk about some numbers, and then we're closing down. If you have any questions, now's the time to be asking them. So each day, we have 50,000 new people signing documents who've never signed a document before each day. And the total of those people has now reached over 50 million people. We have extremely strong encryption practices. Our scheduled downtime is 0, and our uptime goal is, so there's no maintenance windows, as I referred to earlier. Our goal is to always go for 5 nines or beyond, and we've been pretty successful with that. You can look at the stats on our website. And we have enormous effort, a very successful one, to be compliant with standards. So you name it, and we're compliant with it, and that includes all of the key European standards, including the brand new EIDAS signature standard across the European community that's going to come into force in 2016. We're already all set on that. So going back to my first slide is to say again and present to you that all successful businesses will be 100% digital. Each one of you is already a leader in helping your organization do that through SharePoint, and I look forward to meeting you in person at the SharePoint show. I'll be hanging out around a lot at booth 37, and if I'm not there, then please just talk to any of my colleagues. Again, my name is Larry Kluger. You don't have to wait. You can go to this form that you can see right here online, on the screen rather, and start a trial immediately. Or we'll show you everything there is and bring your toughest questions to us in Stockholm. It's going to be a great conference. So I'm going to turn it over to Shane now, and we'll take your Q&A. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Larry, for a great presentation. Now we have some questions we'd like to start with. First up, Larry, you demonstrated someone signing from a mobile. Can documents be sent out for signature from a mobile?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is yes. We have a application for both the Android, the Apple iOS, and also for the Windows mobile systems, and they can be used for sending out documents for signature. Especially the Android and iOS systems apps have just had a refresh and have a lot of new and added capability for both sending out signature requests and for being used to sign documents while offline.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it possible to work with Word or PDF templates with existing signature tags?
I'm sorry, could you say that one again?
Yeah, so is it possible to work with Word or PDF templates with existing signature tag?
So the answer is yes. Now, this is getting to the edge of my expertise, so I would say this would be a great question to also come over and see a demo at the conference. The idea on the PDF side is to turn PDF forms easily into online signable forms, and I do believe we have a solution, a path for that. On the Word side, the form part, I think you would need to redo the form fields, because I believe that's the case, but again, I have technical experts who will be at Stockholm or who can give you a live demo before Stockholm. The one part of Word documents is sometimes the signature field that can be added, and depending on which is the best product from DocuSign for your use case, those already present signature fields can also be reused.
Okay, great. Next question, is DocuSign supported in SharePoint on premises?
Yes, absolutely. And both the DocuSign DTM product and also the CoSign Central product are both well supported with SharePoint on-prem for 2010, 2013. CoSign also, in fact, supports 2007, also supports K2 and Nintex and WebCon, and you can see all that in Stockholm.
Okay, great. Can someone decline a signing request?
Yes, that's an excellent question. People sometimes want to do that. And so what you want to look for from your vendor, and DocuSign offers this, is not simply clicking the no button, but also being able to enter a reason for saying no, and then being able through the API or through other systems to have that reason be visible to the person who sent it. In the case of a document that was automatically sent for signature, also be able to handle that. And we provide all those capabilities.
Okay, great. Another question, are e-signatures legal worldwide?
Yes. Now, that's the simple answer to a complicated problem. The specifics depend on the country and the transaction. And we have a whole department of lawyers. They've completed a guide to how to ensure legal signatures for all the countries around the world, certainly all the major countries. There's maybe some countries that are not covered. That's available on our website. In some countries where, let's talk about Europe in particular, we're talking about Stockholm and the European SharePoint Conference. In some cases in Europe, for some types of transactions, instead of a basic electronic signature, you need either an advanced electronic signature or a qualified electronic signature. And which of those you need depends on the country, depends on the transaction. We can provide some help with that, but the real question of which type you need is something that you want to discuss with your in-house counsel, and then there's people that we can provide that can help your counsel understand these sorts of things. Another part of this is the EIDAS regulations that I mentioned earlier, and their entire purpose is to make it even easier to use online signing across Europe. And so what's important there is to understand whether the company, the vendor has what is their story with regard to that. Our system, because in particular our CoSign Central product line, because we've already passed the common criteria qualification tests, which are quite strenuous, we're already ready to go on that. And for example, one part of common criteria and EIDAS, the way it looks, and we fulfill all this, is that the person needs to use two-factor authentication. So what's often easiest there is to use a SMS message to back up an email request for a document to be signed.
Okay, great. Larry, final question. Will there be a version of the slide deck available afterwards?
Let me see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Great.
So
if
you want that, drop me a line at larry.kluger@docusign.com.
Great. And also what I'll be doing is I'll be sending an email to all attendees with a copy of the webinar online where you'll be able to watch everything afterwards. Thank you, Larry, for taking questions, and thank you to all our attendees for posting the questions. Remember, by being part of the European SharePoint community, you have unlimited access to a world of content like blogs, webinars, how-to videos, and ebooks. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon on our next webinar.